Hey guys, are you looking for a sportsbook that you can trust? Well, look no further than mybookie.ag, where you can get a 50% match on your initial deposit of up to $1,000 when you use promo code DFSArmy. As a bonus, when you use promo code DFSArmy, you also get a free month of DFS Army VIP and DFS Army Beat the Bookie membership. That's a $100 combined value. So we'll help you with your daily fantasy sports and we'll help you with your handicapping. Free when you sign up for mybookie.ag using promo code DFSArmy.
In 2015, an elite DFS Army Commando unit formed to bring high-level DFS strategy to the masses. Today, hated by DFS sharks and lineup sellers alike, they continue their quest to turn Joe into DFS pros.
Hello and welcome to the Taco Tuesday PGA DFS podcast, presented to you by DFSArmy.com. This week we're in for a treat as we head to Pebble Beach, yes, the iconic Pebble Beach, for the US Open. All of our tools are free to the public this week for you guys to come check us out, so DFSArmy.com. Head on down there, check out our PGA tools for the week. A research station is available to the public, and you can get a preview of what's available week to week at DFSArmy.com. We cover pretty much every fantasy sport that you could imagine, and that's all included in one inclusive package covering all sports. You get the research station where you can take a deep analytical dive into the data for each and every sport. This will be referencing throughout the pod. And our domination station, lineup optimizer, which has really come a long way. Lots of cool new features being added all the time. Of course, you got our coaches' notes, our coaching Slack channel. It's definitely one of the most underrated parts of the whole thing. Got a very, very good, very big, active community of guys. I think we're at pushing almost 2,000 members on all of the main channels. Just really awesome place. You can come ask us questions and we'll get you pointed in the right direction for what you need. And this week, of course, being a major week, we get some nice extra props available on the sports books, especially the Make the Cut prop, the most valuable prop in all of golf. And we've got that available up on the research station. It's all completely adjusted to normalize the rake added by the sites. So the percentages you see on there is everyone's actual implied percentages of, whether they're making the top 10, top 20, the cut. Really, really helpful for just getting a very quick look at who the value plays are. Of course, you got our ownership projections now available to easily reference in the domination station when you're running your lineups and exposures. Very awesome for mass multi-entry. And you can get all access to this and even check out the research station for free this week at DFSArmy.com. And on sign up, you can support the pod by using promo code TACO. It's promo code TACO for a lifetime 20% off discount. And it helps support the pod, helps keep us rolling. So without further ado, let's just get right on into the course here. Pebble Beach, it's located just south of San Francisco, San Jose, Santa Monica, just right underneath there. It's a beautiful little hunk of land. It's almost like a peninsula, just a little, I don't know how to explain it. Just you can look up on a map, you can see it just kind of juts out into the Pacific Ocean, way on our west coast here. And this may sound familiar, me bringing up Pebble, because we've been here, just not too long ago. It's part of the West Coast swing the PGA Tour starts their season on. They usually start in Hawaii, then work their way to California, where they have several events. They're all on POA and Newegg greens. And these are pretty much as pure of POA as you can imagine, which of course, leads to, extra variance on the putting surfaces. So it's a good week to fade the guys coming in on some really hot putting. Even though we were at POA last week, that was kind of POA mixed a little bit with bent grass. This is like pure POA. But POA is really bumpy. So it just adds a little bit more variability. And when the USGA is in play, and those are the guys that set up the US Open year to year, variance is the name of the game. Like, we are going to see, we're going to see some big names miss the cut. I mean, that's been the name of the game for a while now. Last year at the US Open, you had Tiger Woods, Rory McIlroy, missed the cut. Jordan Spieth almost missed the cut. You had John Rahm, Jason Day, Adam Scott, Matt Kuchar. They all missed the cut. The USGA loves to set up the US Open to generally have around an even par score winner. Doesn't happen all the time. They love to, work the greens to a tournament 13 stimp meter rating. Probably not going to get there this year. The Pebble Beach has hosted the US Open in 2010 and back in 2000 when, that's arguably one of the biggest majors of all time where, in my opinion, Tiger Woods played the greatest golf that a human being has ever played in the history of the world. Just lapping the field. Everyone posted a score of 3 over par or more, and he's sitting there at 12 under, just 15 strokes in the lead at the very end. Just very iconic, that was peak Tiger Woods back then. Of course, he's missed his last 2 US Open cuts, and coming off of that historic Masters win, it should be a really nice little storyline to see Tiger Woods going back to, Pebble Beach, where, again, 2010, he also finished 4th there. But in 2010, that US Open, it was a little infamous. They really worked the greens to be quite tough. And then, after that, the greens kind of died. They ended up having to reduce the greens fees at Pebble Beach, which are monstrous. Like, it'll cost you thousands of dollars to play Pebble Beach. I mean, this is one of the nicest, if not the nicest golf course in all of America, perhaps even the world. I mean, Googling, best golf courses in the world, Pebble Beach is going to be one that pops up. It is absolutely iconic. The sights are breathtaking. It's right along the coastline, staring out to the Pacific Ocean. And, the shoreline and the cliffs that are well in play for a lot of these holes, especially like holes, like 6 and 7 and such. It's just a really important golf course. I mean, even people who don't follow golf at all whatsoever, if you ask them to name a golf course, chances are they're going to say, Augusta or Pebble Beach. Just everyone knows, you go on a simulator at your local golf course. One of the first options that's going to come up is Pebble Beach. This is a course that I've, personally played hundreds of times, back on the Tiger Woods 14 Country Club grind. I mean, everybody liked to default to either Sawgrass or, mostly Sawgrass. That game is a lot of Sawgrass, but, throughout the years, Pebble Beach has definitely been a course that's, first and foremost to, just one of the most important courses on the PGA Tour. It's one that you play a lot. And honestly, I would recommend just, if not playing the course on like a game or something. I know it's on like right now it's on WGT. They have the virtual US Open. And it'll just give you an idea of what this course is really about. Because I don't think just looking at the course from above does it much justice. One of the key features of this course is the drastic elevation changes that you'll have on your approach shots, on your drive sometimes. And of course, it's a course where, it's actually the shortest course on the PGA Tour, but it is quite difficult because of how it is set up. Like, for example, they have a par 3, hole 7, one of the most iconic holes of all time. Very short. You'd be hard pressed to find, holes that short even on your municipals sometimes, right? But it's the it's the staggering elevation change and the drastic consequences of overshooting that green. I mean, not only do you have disgusting deep bunkers guarding the very front of that green, but you've also got the cliffs behind you, and it's like 50 yards downhill. So, it only plays as a 100-yard hole, but you wouldn't compare it to like a normal 100-yard hole in someone's backyard out in Amish country or something like we have out here. No, this is, it's a lot of pressure. It's almost like 17 on sawgrass, and you get that a lot. The coastlines come into play for very errant shots, but it's not even just that. There's disgusting brush all over the place if you veer too far out. And, the rough length, if you go by blade length, it's not the longest. It's actually a bit shorter than most rough lengths out there on tour. But it's just some really rough, thick POA. People had, posted pictures of it, videos of it on Twitter. You can go check that out and see. It's really tough. It will create some very hard lies. So it's very penal roughs. And, it may lead you to look towards more driving accuracy, especially with this being the shortest course on the PGA Tour. But it's honestly very weird the way it's set up. I mean, most guys are not going to use drivers on most holes. Some holes you don't want to hit a driver, because if you use a regular driver shot, you will be in the rough or the water. Some holes force you to take that driver out of your hand, but you've also got some holes where a driver will actually help you. There's one, I don't remember the exact number. I think it's hole 8 or something, where you've got a very, very nice hill that you can roll down on, but you need to be a very long driver in order to hit it. So, I know it's the shortest course on tour, but there are a handful of holes where having some nice distance will help you. Like the second hole, it's a par 5. It's very easy. A lot of people can eagle that. And you're going to need to capitalize on the 3 par 5s available to you. And you've got the one that's just absolutely astonishing, where you have a completely blind second shot. It's such a huge elevation difference. It's way above you. You really need to know where to hit it. It's experience and pedigree is going to be just so important here. Going to be sort of avoiding some of the real, young, amateur, unexperienced guys, unless they represent just a serious value out there. And, Tiger Woods' old caddy, is caddying for Jason Day right now. Just kind of an example of something that could just really help, with, just having a caddy who knows what they're doing, having, just played the course a lot yourself helps a lot here. And, this is a course that we go to every year on the PGA Tour, but we usually play it in February, right? And, we're in June. So it's going to play a lot different than what they're used to. Plus the fact that it's a Pro-Am and it's got 3 courses on there. So, it's set up sort of like how, the Career Builder is, where they'll play 3 different courses throughout the first 3 days, have a 54-hole cut, and then they go back to Pebble Beach for Sunday. So you can even, when looking at history here on the research station, we've got Pebble Beach history up alongside U.S. Open history. I know the U.S. Open is played at a different course about every year, but the USGA sets it up to certain standards where it's going to be important to look at kind of both of these trends here. But at the same time, overall, if we're looking at course history stuff, we're looking at both Pebble Beach and the U.S. Open, but we're factoring them all in a lot less than you would a normal event where they play the course 4 rounds the same time every year. That's when course history is going to matter a bit more. It might even be worth fading some guys that have really good course history at Pebble specifically, or even at the U.S. Open. I know Brooks is coming in looking for his 3rd straight win at the U.S. Open and just seems to crush it every year. And some guys are just really good with the setup that the USGA puts out there. But with ownership being so important and with variance levels being really high up there, like almost the players level high, It's going to be important to fade ownership this week. I cannot stress that enough. That is going to be the play here. And honestly, if someone's getting too out of hand, or for example, one of the fades that I've listed up on my coach's notes this week is Jason Day, who has the 5 straight top 11 finishes at Pebble Beach. Well, that's a Pro-Am. It's just a completely different atmosphere. When you've got celebrities with you and most people are having a hunky-dory good time. And comparing that to, a major, what's very serious and with a completely different setup, I think that could be a very advantageous way to apply some leverage to the field. So you're going to want to make smart plays like that. We'll get more into the player pool here in a little bit. Just want to keep talking about the course here. So we're on, it's way out in California. Might be worth looking at guys who tend to succeed on the West Coast, not so much on the East Coast. You've got your guys like Brendan Steele, Charles Howell III, Jimmy Walker especially. There are some guys like that really are good at the West Coast. John Rahm as well, Phil Mickelson. You may be wanting to look at those guys too, but if they're going to be popular, I wouldn't really want to pile on to that. There probably will be some plays that are going to be really popular because they're just really underpriced that you still just might want to play, but still the recommendation for those kind of guys would be to play them in cash games. Play them on draft.com or whatever website you can where ownership isn't a factor. Maybe play them in one and done, stuff like that to get that cross-site hedging, which is really important. Always a plus EV move to make there. It's going to be how you want to attack this week. And honestly, if you can make a good case for a guy who's going to be low owned, you're going to want to play them. Looking at the field here, if you just look at it like it's every other week, the guys at the top, instead of being 5, 6, 7 to 1 like we saw last week, they're going to be like 9, 10, 11 to 1. And, the books are a little tricky right now because with all this public money going out to these sites, they're raising... they're raising the juice across the board, just really trying to rake it in. You can see on the research station, they have the drifts from just what they opened at and, where they're at right now. And you can see a lot of lines of change, and most of them have gone backwards. And, some of that might also be due to just the unpredictability of the USGA setups. And, another thing with Pebble Beach is it's right out there exposed to everything. And the wind could really... be a factor. You get some very heavy winds and gusts that add to a lot of the variability at this course. It usually plays over par on average, but even more so when it's the U.S. or when it's held by the U.S. Open. I mean, of course, I just mentioned 2000. Everyone was well over par, except for Tiger. He's not really all that human apparently. He was kind of super Saiyan back then, but. Yeah, they're going to have it set up a lot tougher than it's used to being set up for the Pro-Am. And it's just going to be an entirely different thing. This week, I just want to attack ownership. And, fade a lot of the guys that come in putting well. I think around the green stats are going to be more important than putting this week. We've got these smallest greens on tour as far as square footage goes. Very, very small greens. So guys that... guys like Jordan Spieth and Shane Lowry, guys that have been banking on, very long putting and just making a ton of long putts. It's not going to be as valuable here. You're going to be a lot more scrambling, or, if you do hit the green, you're going to be a lot closer to the hole, and you're going to have that POA. It's adding just a little bit of variance to the whole thing. So we're going to be looking at around the green stuff. Off the tee, not as much. It's really a mixed bag, like I said. Some holes, it's very obvious where you need to hit the ball. I ran some numbers by average fairway width, and that's actually very misleading here because this actually has one of the widest fairway widths on tour, but it's not anything like a Kapalua that's just like wide open, It's very misleading because oftentimes they have some very huge fairways, but they're only like 200, 220 yards down there. So they're like wide open spots for the shortest of short, hitters to go off of. Like hole 1 is a perfect example. The landing strip there, if you hit it over 300 yards, is tiny, very tiny. And they're going to be working on making those fairways really tight. They've moved some fairways around on some of these holes. It's going to be playing a little over 7,000 yards now, even moving some tees back. So, not going to be renovating the course nearly as much as they did in 2010 to avoid a lot of that. And some players have expressed concerns regarding that, but still, we're probably going to end up with a course that plays a lot tougher than we're used to seeing. The greens are going to be fast. I don't know if they'll hit the 13 like we try to get for the U.S. Open usually. Looking like it'll be about a 12 and a half, which aren't the fastest greens ever. These usually aren't the fastest greens on tour. On average, the stint meter is right at a 12, but they should be able to get it to about 12 and a half. But there is also that chance that they do work it all the way up to 13, bake the greens or whatever, just don't really give a crap. Not a lot of sand on the course. Actually, of all the, I ran through 46 courses that had data for sand strokes, and this ranked 41st out of all of those. Not many strokes taken out of the sand, but we do see a ton of fairway strokes, and especially wedge shots. This has the most wedge shots of any course, and it makes a lot of sense being that this is the shortest course, but another course that's very similar in length, TPC River Highlands at the Travelers Championship, we barely see more strokes taken than average with wedge shots. This course definitely lends itself to that. If you look at the setup, it's got several very, very, very short par 4s, and that's a lot of what goes into making this the shortest track, despite it not even being a par 70. It's par 71. And, the par 5s, they're not all too long. They have the one long one and two relatively short, easy par 5s. But, the way that they have it set up, most of the time, you're going to want to place your drives very well. But does that mean that we're looking at driving accuracy in particular? Well, it's hard to really judge. We don't get the good strokes gained data, from the regular Pro-Am event. And even so, it's a completely different setup, time of year, different environment. Just a lot of factors that go into the whole thing. So really looking at strokes gained approach, it's going to be very important. Strokes gained around the green also, more important than a usual week, I'd say. I'm going to be looking more towards a good drive percentage and just strokes gained off the tee, I guess, for off the tee stuff. Having distance is not really going to help you all too much, but I think that driving accuracy numbers are, it's going to be a little bit more skewed. What I am going to be looking at are guys that are very, very short off the tee that may struggle at some other courses. Those guys are going to be helped out a lot by the general lack of distance here. We're going to definitely be on like the Jim Furyks of the world. Him in particular, we'll get to him as we go down this field. So yeah, let's look at this field overall and just start off with some just looking at the overall, drifts like I had mentioned earlier. A lot of the top guys, around 8-1, 10-1 or so. They're all looking like about, they're getting to the double digit marks. DJ and Rory coming in at the favorites right now, 9-1. And there's honestly a case to be made to just avoid all the studs up top. If we expect the scores to be a bit more random and not necessarily as skill based, and you're not really factoring statistics in as much as a usual week. It just seems a lot less predictive than usual. There's that case to be made to really just fade a lot of the top guys because, they're better than the guys down low, but there's an argument to be made that there's no way that they're, good enough to justify being played at like $10,000, $11,000. And maybe just going with more of a uniform, balanced lineup. It does feel like the lineups you can make doing that are really nice, but there are enough values down low and mispriced guys to be able to to even do like a 4 value 2 stud lineup and feel really comfortable about it. It is a major. It's not super soft, but there are some guys that are quite mispriced, and you can just take advantage of that and get your studs in and not feel too bad about it. Like, you're gonna want some Tiger Woods, I would imagine, and you're gonna have to just pay for them. You're gonna want some Dustin Johnson, right? And Brooks Koepka, you might want some exposure to him. You can definitely get these guys. Just going to need to focus on, if not just coming up with one punt, and there, for once there are actually going to be some viable punts way down low at the 6K range, even lower, more than we're used to seeing. At like the Masters, where the entire bottom part of the field is just completely loaded with guys that have no chance whatsoever. And it's much different than the Masters, and more like the PGA Championship in the sense that, at the Masters you had like 80 some golfers. This is a full field of like 155. Very, very similar to the US Open in that regard. A lot of qualifiers from local and sectional qualifying that made it there. Most of the guys that did qualify that way are PGA Tour players in the first place, but you do have a bunch of some amateurs and some young college guys there at the bottom. Probably not going to end up doing very much, and you do have your your residual guys, but there are actually some plays in the low 6K range that you could almost make a case for. So lots of different ways you could attack it this week. I would just recommend going ownership. If you're, it just seems like the smart thing to do here with all the variants in play. So let's get in the field here. You got to start with Brooks Koepka, 2-time back-to-back winner at the U.S. Open. Won at Shinnecock last year, and Erin Hills in 2017, and even going back the last few years, 13th at Oakmont in 2016, 18th at Chambers Bay in 2018. And the thing about these recent courses is these have been some long link style courses that we've really been to. Very, very long courses. It's very different this year with it being a much, much shorter course than we're used to. So you guys like Brooks Koepka, Dustin Johnson up here, a lot of these 300 plus yard drivers, they may not have the advantage that we're used to seeing them have at these much longer courses, especially like at Oakmont where DJ won. Like, obviously, there's almost almost 1,000-yard difference in these courses, it would seem. But if you're going to make a case against Brooks, it's pretty easy. He gains a lot of strokes, off the tee generally. I mean, over his last 10 rounds, his approach has been on fire. That was pretty much at the PGA Championship, and you can look at it. The first 3 rounds, he gained 4.5, 4.2, and then 2.5 strokes approach. And then on Sunday, he lost a stroke and a half approach, but that was honestly like a victory lap at that point. The irons have really been on point for the most part with him, and strokes gained off the tee, if you go long term, that's where his money's always made. I'm actually losing strokes around the green recently, and putting he's like a dead average putter. So look at his field rank at majors and WGC events. For anyone that doesn't know what a field rank is, it literally just tells you what percentage of golfers they beat in a given event. So if you come in first, it's 100%. If you come in last, it's 0%. Well, in 10 events at WGCs and majors over the last year, he averages 86%, which is tied with Dustin Johnson for number 1 in the entire field. If you look at short courses, 66%. Compare that 87% from Dustin Johnson, and that's in 5 events played at very short courses. He hasn't played here at the Pro-Am since 2016, where he finished 8th. So really all signs point to Brooks Koepka being good, being a good pick. 50th last week at the Canadian. And if you remember last year, he blew up at the Canadian, almost finished last place. But he was on record saying that he doesn't care about his performance at the Canadian Open. He just wanted to feel good going into the PGA Championship. And honestly, he really, he wasn't really given too much of a crap. He started off with really hot irons round 1. And ended up solid for the week. I mean, just weekend he wasn't really caring, but you got to think about it. He's going to go for shots that if he was actually trying to win the tournament, he wouldn't have dared to take in the first place. It's really just like a glorified practice round for him there. But it's easy to see him turning around and just crushing. That's what it feels like. It feels like he has a really good chance of that happening again. But for $11,600 on DraftKings and 12-3 on FanDuel, a little bit more playable on FanDuel, where it's just 100 more than Dustin Johnson. Just 400 more than Tiger is where he's almost 1,000 more than Tiger on DraftKings. It's just hard to justify playing him on DraftKings all too much, but he does have a lot of stuff going his way. It's pretty much him, Dustin Johnson, Justin Thomas as the ultimate fantasy scoring guys in this field. They really do stick out as far as projected round score. We get that by just looking at average fantasy points at the different hole types and combine them all together. Of course, I'm factoring that in less than I do most weeks. It is one of my favorite stats I do like to look to. But with the course design, a lot of holes play much differently than just their yardage would suggest. So you're going to be looking more to just overall and especially long-term stats here. And, long-term over the last year, his field rank of 76% is not really all that comparable to Dustin Johnson, Tiger Woods, Rory McIlroy, who are all 80% or above there. Of course, he does take some weeks off occasionally, but he has had some, less than great performance. But he did have the wrist injury. It's going back to over a year ago now, though. He's kind of long past that. So Brooks, I would be all about if it wasn't for the fact that he's priced, way, way up there. It's almost going to be a fade for me, but man, has he just destroyed the majors. Back-to-back PGA championships, runner-up at the Masters. It's just insane what he's capable of, so I'm not going to have zero of him. I just can't. You gotta get some in there, but probably going to be a little bit underweight to the field. Just because of how I feel about some other guys here. The hardest part of a major week is definitely finding who to fade. It feels like you want to play everybody up here, but just going to be under on Brooks for better or worse. Probably worse, but it's just the way I want to go about this. Dustin Johnson. Now, he's a very interesting case here. Back-to-back winner at the Pebble Beach Pro-Am in 2008, 2009. Runner-up in 2014 and 2018, third in 2017, fourth in 2015, fifth in 2012. The dude is killer at Pebble Beach. And in 2010, when they played here at the U.S. Open, he finished 8th. Very good at the U.S. Open in general. This is where he won his only major in 2016 at Oakmont. But 2014 is 4th, second at Chambers Bay in 2015. Third last year at Shinnecock, and just had the miscut in 2017, honestly, and 2012, but usually very, very good at the U.S. Open. But a lot of these courses have been longer courses where a distance has mattered a lot. Of course, that mattered a lot when he won at Oakmont in 2016. But he has the number 1 in projected round score of anyone in this field. Second in projected fantasy point scoring, a little bit better than Brooks there. And as far as performances go, he's just been ultra consistent. Runner up at the PGA, also runner up at the Masters alongside Brooks. So he's been right there with Brooks at the top of these majors, and really going back the last year or so, just constantly finishing in the top 10, just doing his thing. Won at WGC Mexico. Of course, that was, all about bombing there. Now, this course, of course, it's, much shorter. The short game's going to matter a bit more. But he's pretty much a POA putting specialist. A lot better at putting than Brooks Koepka here. Pretty similar around the green stats. Actually, almost identical around the green stats. Almost no matter what split you're looking at here. And strokes gained approach has kind of fallen off a little bit just over the last 10 rounds. But usually that's very, very good. Usually he's better than Brooks in that regard, but we've seen him do a lot of work off the tee recently, which, has always been his MO. But he's really looking like one of the safest plays here and is very good at Pebble in particular. I do like him a bit more than Brooks Koepka. Probably going to be one of the studs that I'm really looking to here. Better stats than Koepka in almost every category, just slightly. That's kind of what I'm just going for here, honestly. And then Tiger Woods at $10,700 on DraftKings. Had that miscut at the PGA Championship after taking a month off, partying after his historic Masters win that you're probably almost tired of hearing about by now. So we're not that far removed from the greatness that was the Masters this year. And right now we're headed to, again, like I had mentioned earlier in this pod, a place of history where he had the best golf of all time. He followed that up in 2010 with a fourth place finish. I mean, mad props to the guys who finished above him, like McDowell and such. That's a huge feat. Since he's not had the greatest luck at the U.S. Open. 2015, we can scratch that one because 2015 was a throwaway year for him. He finished 150th. It's not going to happen. This was one of the few events where he actually tried to put up a start, and he failed miserably. Ended up just taking the whole 2016 season off. Didn't come here in 2017 either, and missed the cut last year. But I think redemption could easily come his way. It's Tiger at a major. He hasn't played the Pro-Am since 2012, where he finished 15th, but generally very good at the course. Just someone you're going to want to get exposure to one way or another. Very good approach stats, very good at closing. We've seen him, just be rock solid rounds 3 and 4, which you're going to want at a major. As far as pedigree goes, he is, he's Tiger Woods, so that helps. But as far as value goes, Rory right underneath him, and even Dustin Johnson above him, and I don't know about Koepka, but Dustin Johnson, Rory McIlroy do seem like better values at this spot. With the public being in play, his ownership is going to be up there, even though he's priced up, but it won't be too crazy. It won't break the 20% mark. I mean, in the lowest of entries, free contests and stuff, he's going to be over 20% probably. We've seen in the past, when they had the free contest every week, you would see his ownership just be way higher in that, and probably lower in the expensive entries, and that's about what you can expect from him, but should have ownership in the teens. And if you'll play him, there's nothing wrong with that. He's a perfectly fine stud to use. And I think Rory's performance last week will also lead to his ownership being a little bit lower than it was going to be coming in. So let's talk about that real quick. Rory McIlroy, tied for favorite in this field with Dustin Johnson currently. He's missed the cut the last 3 U.S. Opens, which is kind of astonishing. Won here back in 2011. Well, not here, but, he missed the cut here, specifically in 2012. That was, it's kind of worrisome. He also missed the cut in his one time that he played the Pro-Am over the last decade, finishing 94th in 2018. So there's some concern there, but if you watched any of last week, you saw how he just absolutely crushed on Sunday. His first hole, he damn near holed it out. He really should have, if it wasn't for a pin. So it's not really possible for Rory to come in any less hot. He missed the cut at the Memorial, just on the dot. But before that, wanted the Players, which is pretty much a major, effectively a major nowadays. Top 10 pretty much everywhere, top 10 at the PGA Championship. And even though, his game you'd figure would lend itself more to longer courses, we've seen him at 3 short courses so far this year. The Players would be considered one of those courses for sure. Less than Driver, and he has a 98% field rank in those, which of course is going to be the best in this field. So Rory, probably looking to be the chalkiest of anyone that I've talked about so far, just with people having that fresh in their minds from last week, and him being a relative value, with him having the lowest odds, second lowest odds, just barely over Dustin Johnson right now, and him being 4th on the board in salary on both sides. should lead to him being fairly popular, probably higher teens. Maybe 20% in some contests, but probably higher teens. And he does make for a really good value. It's just, recently at the U.S. Open and, Pebble Beach, Pro-Am, something he doesn't really go to. He's probably one of those guys that really likes to avoid the riffraff. We've seen Tiger Woods also avoid it. Ricky Fowler, we've seen him avoid it. Can't really hold it against him too much. So he really does make for a solid play. It's just, you don't really have to play him. He's not a great, not great as far as ownership will be. Like last week, he was only 13% owned, and that was good. But we can definitely count on him skyrocketing in ownership. Not skyrocketing, but definitely holding on to a big chunk of ownership here, because we had seen him be really high owned up until that miscut at the Memorial that everybody overreacted to. And he almost shot like a 60 on Sunday if he didn't, if he wasn't so lackadaisical at the end there. I think that's going to be what keeps his ownership well up there. And, he gains the most fantasy points to the field on average, gains the most birdies to the field on average, just over the last few months. Lots of good cases to be made for him. Been putting really well recently, almost gaining a stroke per round over his last 10. Off the tee stuff's been phenomenal. Approach, phenomenal. Ball striking's not a concern for any of these top guys. But he's probably the best with his short game recently. But Tiger Woods, I think, actually has a little bit of an edge here just because his around the green game always is really strong. And that's something you're going to really need to focus on here. Speaking of strong around the green games, we've seen Jordan Spieth, $10,300 on DraftKings. We've seen him be really strong in that category, and especially strong putting lately, gaining a stroke and a half over his last 25 rounds. And it's led to him actually starting to make consistent cuts. And over the last 3 events, the PGA Championship, Charles Schwab Challenge, and the Memorial, he's finished top 10 in each of those. Unfortunately, in that same span, he's losing strokes approach at a pretty bad rate, actually. By far the worst at approach of anyone, like 9K and above. Like the worst. The worst with driving accuracy. We're talking like driving accuracy worse than like Jason Day's. Just really bad. And it's been like that for a good while now. But still, birdieing a lot, but also double bogeying a ton. Get into a lot of trouble. Over 3% of the time he's double bogeying or worse. And that is, almost an alarming number for him. Winner here at Pebble Beach at the Pro-Am in 2017. Generally does play pretty good here. He won U.S. Open at Chambers Bay after his initial Masters win in 2015. He's going to be a fade for me. Just obviously not a very good odds to pricing value. With him being just $200 cheaper than Rory, but he's 20-1 and Rory's 9-1. Like, it's obvious there, but ranks 36 in projected round score, and just the fact that he's gotten all of his work done through the putter, and he's headed to these POA greens where he was good on them last week, but generally he's a worse putter on POA than some other surfaces, usually more into like bent grass and stuff. It's harder to pick your fades this week, and Spieth, it made it easy for me to fade Spieth. I think the ownership he just ends up over owned. I don't think he's gonna be as owned as Koepka, Johnson, Woods, or McIlroy. He's just not going to be, but he's gonna be over owned to the point where I'm not going to want to play him just for the ownership, because there's a lot of other stuff going against him that I just don't like here. You've got Patrick Cantlay at $10,000, last of the 10K or above guys. And he's just been playing phenomenally since missing the cut at the Players, which is like the most forgivable miscut ever. Just all top 10 since then. Been hammering him. He's been a core play. And if he wasn't so darn expensive, he'd be a core play again. Like, he's more expensive than Justin Rose, Ricky Fowler, and Justin Thomas. So it all culminated with him winning the Memorial in a very good fashion. The dude's been a beast. 8 top 10 finishes in this 2018 golf season, since the swing season pretty much. The term Cantlay truther needs to be retired permanently. Like, that was just such a dumb concept. He's really, really good. Just very good at golf. It's kind of been what I've said about him. Top 10 here way back in 2013 before his injury that kept him out for several years. Back when he was looking like a serious threat. Made some cuts also back then, 2012 and 2011 at the U.S. Open. Didn't play here in 2010. He would have been just a bit too young, but did make the cut last year at Shinnecock. If he wasn't priced up so much, I would definitely be on him. Odds are slightly better than Jordan Spieth here, but still, Rory McIlroy, just much better value there. And even Rose, Fowler, Thomas underneath him. They should be priced a little bit higher just because, they're more bona fide than he is. And he's going to retain some ownership as well. And that's a pretty game log right there. 4 top 10s in a row, just coming off a win. Ooh, that's nice. But yeah, he's going to be a cash game staple, I think, for me. I'll definitely lock him in cash games. Try to get him on draft, stuff like that. And play him on FanDuel. I think he's a little bit better of a value there on FanDuel, where he's a bit cheaper than Justin Thomas and Justin Rose. They've got a little bit more Ustin respect over there. It is funny that there are 3 Ustins in the entire field, and really in all of the PGA Tour. And, for a while there were the 3 top golfers in the world. I'll never get over that. That's one of my favorite golf trivias right now. But yeah, Cantlay just looking like a solid play, but I'm going to keep him for cash because I do think he retains some ownership. And he's just expensive now. It's a shame to see him priced up so much. Just so used to him being a 7-8K kind of guy. But he's up there with the studs, kind of like, he's deserved this entire time. So, I mean, props to him. I'll try to get him, but it's going to be very, very hard. And Justin Rose, $9,700. No one's been owning this guy all year long, it seems. People don't care about Justin Rose. He ranks 5th in projected round score at this course, or for this course. Usually fairly good at Pebble Beach. Avoids it most of the time. 6th in 2016. The U.S. Open is where he won his major in 2013. 10th last year. Generally makes the cuts, but did struggle in 2017, 2016. I don't really care too much about that. I'm very pro Justin Rose this week. I think he's a good GPP leverage play. Hasn't been gaining a ton of birdies though, something I'm a little bit concerned about there. Compared to all the other studs, they're gaining 1, 2, 3, or 4 birdies to the field, adjusted for 4 rounds. But Rose just right around even with the field. It's a little bit concerning. Very, slowing down in that regard. Missed the cut at the Masters, etc. But most recently at the Memorial, we saw him absolutely pop off round 2. He's been like a round 2 showdown god just over the last year. He's like 3 strokes better in round 2 than he is in any other round. Curious why that's the case there. But I don't know, he just seems to be a Friday warrior so far, which is nice as far as, cut making goes. But it's that ownership, I think, that's going to lead me to Justin Rose. That and the price. Like, he shouldn't be lower than Cantlay or Spieth. Like, that's kind of weird to me, but that's where he's at, so we got to like him there. Ricky Fowler, sort of the same way. He's made 10 straight major cuts, which is really nice. A lot of top 10s in those. I think it was, 3 or 4 years ago, he had the year where he was like top 5 in every single major. He's just yet to win one. There's always, people would make the case that he's the best golfer without a major. I still say that's Matt Kuchar, and it's really easy to argue that now without Kuchar's playing, but Kuchar and Fowler far away the best golfers without a major. Maybe John Rahm's getting to the discussion there, but certainly overdue. Like I said, he ignores Pebble Beach. He does not go to this Pro-Am. Missed the cut in 2012 and hasn't come back. And I don't blame him, because if I was a PJ golfer, I would do the exact same thing. Screw the Pro-Am. I don't want to mess with any of that. I might go to it, but I wouldn't want to play in it. That just doesn't seem like fun. It's his 5th here in 2017, runner-up in 2014. I think that was the year where he had the top 5s in all the majors. I like him for cash, too. I know you can't really play Cantlay and Fowler together in cash. Maybe you can, just as your top 2 guys, but that's where I'm leaning at right now, playing Fowler in cash. Maybe not using him in GPP. He tends to be very popular with the public, so if you're in like a single entry, low entry contest, he's going to be more owned because he's Ricky Fowler. The girls think he's beautiful, and the guys think he's beautiful. So, if you're looking at other contests, I mean, he's a perfectly fine play, I think, honestly. Just, probably won't go overweight on him, but if I land on him, that's perfectly fine. And you've got Justin Thomas at $9,300, who I think will end up being more popular than people would think. There's a concern, obviously, missed like 2 months with a wrist injury, and then missed the cut horribly at the Memorial. But you can tell that Friday, when he shot like an 80, he had checked out. He didn't care. I was watching him a bit on PGA Tour Live. He didn't care. I don't think it was his wrist bothering him. And he showed last week that was not the case. And yeah, he just didn't really care, honestly, is how I see it. And if you look at his fantasy scoring stats, he's got the top fantasy scoring projection per round. Looking into that a little bit further, it's because of he's second in projected round score, but first in projected FanDuel points per round, DraftKings points per round. It's the short par fives. He's second in that, ninth in long par fives, fourth in long par fours, of which there are 4 of at the course. You got the 3 medium length par fours, which is lower than usual, but even then he's 8th in those and 29th in the short par fours. He just has a well-rounded, good DraftKings scoring game. I do believe he's number 1 in the entire field in fantasy points per hole, just straight up. And that's the way it's been. Of course, his long-term stats a little better than short-term right now, but still gains a ton of birdies to the field. Last week, he just sucked with his putter, but killed at tee to green. Just killed at tee to green. And so far, I've seen everyone beyond Justin Thomas, so I'm kind of worried about that. But I think he's not egregiously underpriced, but he is definitely underpriced. He should be more expensive than Fowler, Rose, Cantlay, and Spieth. I think he should be right there underneath Rory McIlroy. That'd be a proper value for him. At $9,300, going to be very easy to justify playing him. Like Fowler, he played this once in 2014 and decided, nah, and never came back for the Pro-Am. The U.S. Open, he's been fine, making the cut, top 30 pretty much every year. I like Justin Thomas. I hope people don't play him, but I think that people will. Jon Rahm. Oh, by the way, I'm not playing Justin Thomas in cash, but I might. I don't mind him in GPPs. I probably will attack him there. I just really plan on using Cantlay or Rose or both. Because I really want them in my lineups. Or not Rose, it's Cantlay or Fowler. Because I want them in my lineups, but I don't really want them in like GPP as much. But yeah, Justin Thomas might be so underpriced that you will see him in a lot of people's cash game lineups, to be honest. Then you've got Jon Rahm, $9,200. He murders West Coast events. He crushes them with reckless abandon. Pretty much top 10 every single time. 26th and 5th here at the Pebble Beach Pro-Am. Did not play in this year's installment. Missed the cut pretty tragically over the last 2 years at the U.S. Open. 23rd and 2016. When he misses a cut, it's usually just to him tilting really hard, which he does. He has a fairly low temperament threshold. He's also missed his last 2 cuts on the PGA Tour, the PGA Championship and Charles Schwab Invitational. But before that, he was on a pretty darn good top 10 run, just across all things. Had some finishes in the European Tour that are very good. He does rank 35th in projected round score, but he's a lot better of a fantasy scorer than most people would be. Gained some birdies and fantasy points generally. It's no surprise he's been struggling a little bit lately, but we have seen his number of double bogeys lower significantly to where he's almost one of the lowest of all the studs up top here in that number. So Jon Rahm, just a really sneaky contrarian GPP play. Love him for GPP. Would not touch him in cash, but he should come in with a single-digit ownership. People do not like playing guys that have missed multiple cuts in a row. But going back to the West Coast, I think it's a very good thing for Jon Rahm, especially California. I'm just all about that there. So GPP, get you some Rahm. Then Jason Day. I had talked about him earlier. I don't really need to re-explain myself here, but, constant top 10s at Pebble Beach, the Pro-Am, and a bunch of top 10s in the U.S. Open. In the last decade, he's had 6 top 10s, or 5 top 10s at the Pebble Beach, and 1 T11, so pretty much a top 10. And then 5 of them at the U.S. Open, too. He's just missed the cut pretty badly over his last 2. And I don't like how he's losing 2 birdies to the field on average, gaining only 3 fantasy points to the field on average. If you look at everyone else that I've talked about so far, they gain at least 13 or more, if not in the 20s as far as fantasy points to the field goes. Like Rory McIlroy gains 29 fantasy points to the field on average. Rahm does not, or not Rahm, but Jason Day does not. He's almost to a point where he's losing on average. Looked bad at Memorial, honestly. He's just not scoring fantasy points as well as like his finishes have been, especially recently. So, hard to pick the fades here. Gonna have to go that way with Day, and I think his ownership would be in the double digits. People are gonna see his Pebble Beach finishes and just kind of lock him in. But I'm not very huge on Jason Day this week. It is important to note that he does have Tiger Woods' old caddy Williams on the bag this week. It should be a huge bonus to him. I'm not going to take that from him. I'm just personally not going to play him. He gets all of his work done putting. He loses strokes approach consistently. Usually very good around the greens. Not been the case lately. Losing strokes around the green. Or just like 0.1 strokes gained around the green over the last 10. Lost 0.2 strokes around the green last 25. It's not encouraging at all. That's not really the Jason Day I know. It should regress a little bit, but makes more than enough of a case for a fade for me. At $9,000, Francesco Molinari. I know he can win it pretty much every time, but he hasn't looked the greatest, honestly. Missed the cut at the RBC Heritage, a place where he really should do a lot better. 48th at the PGA, 53rd at the Charles Schwab. Really hasn't been the best of seasons for him. He did win earlier at the Arnold Palmer? Yeah, the Arnold Palmer Invitational. He won that and followed that up with a 5th at the Masters, which is neat. It's cool. It's awesome. But you're going to be playing him for the ownership. I think he's going to be in the single digits easily in GPP. He does have that upside about him. Statistically, it doesn't really stick out that great at all. Not very good at fantasy scoring. He just ain't by the way he plays. He doesn't get like eagles and stuff really. But he is the shortest person off the tee that I've talked about so far, and this course should help with that. Usually pretty good with driving accuracy, but the greens and reg number's been struggling, and that's kind of what you play him for. Losing birdies to the field, it's not really a good time to be playing Molinari just straight up based on merit, but you're probably going to play him because of that ownership. That's why you would play him. So just a contrarian play to make up top. And then you get to one of my favorite plays of the week. Actually, my favorite play of this entire week is Mr. Tommy Fleetwood, my spirit golfer, my main man right there. He's been up there competing for the win the last 2 U.S. Opens. Runner-up last year in 4th in 2017. Made the cut in 2015 as well, finishing T27. Those are his U.S. Opens. Did play in this year's Pebble Beach, finishing 45th. If you count the European Tour, this dude has made 29 straight cuts. If you think the European Tour is crap and you don't care about those results, he still made 21 straight cuts. Going back to the day I met him at the Wells Fargo Championship, where apparently I must have given him some bad juju on accident. He missed the cut there, but since then, he's been phenomenal. Great at fantasy scoring. Obviously, just destroying with the made cuts. 84% field rank at majors. Very, very good there. Right on par with the DJs and Rorys and that of the world. He does get most of his work done off the tee, which isn't ideal. Better, just an average putter on tour recently. Really just overall, but he's better at POA. Just everything really lines up for him. Just well-rounded as could be. I just like Tommy Fleetwood a lot. Going to be playing him. He's not going to be a hidden secret or anything. I think people will play him, but you will have a very popular play in Matsuyama right next to him in salary. I think Fleetwood would be too owned to call him a pivot play. Like, Molinari is the pivot play there, but Fleetwood, I do not mind smashing him, going well overweight to the field. And honestly, I'll try to do the same thing with Matsuyama, honestly. Talk about him. He's probably my second favorite play. Like, this 8K range is disgustingly good. I'm going to be hammering this 8K range. You can make an entire lineup that's 5 guys in the 8K range and then like 1 guy in the 7K, and you're golden. Love Hideki. His iron play is kind of regressing a little bit. Over the last 50 rounds, he gains 1 stroke approach, which is like second best in this entire field, only to Henrik Stenson, who is just the best at ball striking. But yeah, his ball striking has been great, but his performances, his finishes, has been very good, getting better and better every week. 6th at the Memorial most recently. Usually very good at U.S. Opens. Runner-up in 2017, 16th last year. Only 1 missed cut in 2016. Do like Matsuyama. He's never played the Pro-Am. He avoids that, but might be very unfamiliar with the course. Obviously, it wasn't a pro golfer. Well, he was, but he was on the PGA Tour in majors and stuff in 2010 when they played it here. So course familiarity might not be the greatest thing for him. And but yeah, honestly, I just like how he rates out just in general. And maybe his course inexperience will keep people from over-owning the crap out of him. I still have him, set for a very high projection, almost similar to Rory McIlroy, but it's hard to argue with how just consistent and good he's been. Very strong cash game play as well. And then you've got Xander Schauffele, $8,700. Very expensive on FanDuel. Quite priced up over there. Might not be worth it, but his U.S. Open finishes are 6th and 5th. He kills it at WGCs, at majors. He won the Tour Championship, the Tournament of Champions. He's very, very, very good in strong fields. Also very bad at short courses, we found out, because in 5 events played over the last year at short courses, 49% field rank. I don't know if it justifies a full fade for me. He still rates out very well in a lot of other areas, but that is just an area of concern to watch out for with Mr. Xander. I'm a little bit biased, just a little bit. He's him and I share a very similar ethnicity, to being Taiwanese as well. So I like that they did add another Taiwanese guy to this field to go along with CT Pan, who qualified with his win at the RBC Heritage. What was his name again? I think it was Chan Yu, right? Yeah, it was Chan and Yu. My gosh, you can make a little Taiwanese stack there just for taco. Use Chan, use Xander, use CT Pan. Heck yeah, I'm definitely doing that. But otherwise, just an alright play. Maybe if he was cheaper, I'd be more into him. And, people are just going to know to play him at majors and stuff, so I don't think the ownership will be all that great. Just a standard play. He does rate out as a little bit of an odds to pricing value, which means he might be higher owned in some GPPs that are higher dollar and stuff, but just rates out okay for me. Adam Scott at $8,600. This is a man that's gotten really hot over the last 15 weeks. He's played 5 events, 81% field rank, and he was kind of trending in the right directions as far as strokes gained goes with him. He's been destroying around the greens, gaining a stroke per round over the last 10, and that's going to be really helpful here. Much better Poa Anua putter, and his putter has been improving as the seasons come along. Ultra good with his ball striking, and we've seen his approach game really start to get better and better, and that is him regressing to the mean, because for years he was like the number 1 on tour at strokes gained approach, at proximity to the hole, and that had gone away from him a little bit, and I'd been kind of watching for him to come back. We've seen it with guys like Stenson, with guys like Sergio, guys that are continually good with their approach game. They may struggle for a little bit, but regression to the mean works both ways, and we're seeing Scott get back to that. He has the most beautiful swing in golf. That is just a fact of life. Love me some Adam Scott. I don't think he's going to be underowned at all. People are definitely going to be on him. The game log is pretty. He does have very concerning results over the last 2 years at both Pebble Beach and the U.S. Open. Some missed cuts there, but I don't really care all too much because, again, we're not looking as hard into that as you would in a normal week. So that's going to be less of something we're looking at. I don't like how he is the lowest in fantasy point per hole of anyone that I've talked about so far. But we're just looking at recent stuff. Like recently, he's just really been on a roll, gaining a lot of birdies to the field, fantasy points to the field and all that, and really staying away from the double bogeys as well. Just really easy for me to like Scott. I just like where he's trending there. And then Matt Kuchar at $8,500. Missed the cut, the Memorial. Finally misses a cut. And then right after that, what does he do? Bam, top 10 again. Over the last decade, he has made 4 times as many top 10 finishes, which, by the way, he leads the PGA Tour in that span of any golfer, the most top 10s. But he has 4 times as many top 10 finishes as he does missed cuts. Oh, and he's also 291 yards off the tee. Pebble helps him. He finished 22nd here earlier in the year, which oddly enough is one of his worst finishes on the year. Not much more should be said about this guy. He's starting to putt amazingly. Around the green, he's still just incredibly average. No matter what split you're looking at, it's 0 strokes gained or lost. But he's consistently just been gaining a lot of strokes approach. That's been his bread and butter for a little while now. Off the tee, he's very accurate, just short. So this is a great place for him. Love me some Kuchar this week. Pretty much a core play almost. It doesn't really come off as a good odds to pricing value, but I'll definitely pay that for Kuchar. He seems very fairly priced. And then you've got Finau at $8,400. Popped off at all the majors last year. I think he had top 10 in every single one of them. Looked pretty bad at the Memorial, which was really good because I had him as a fade there after the runner-up finish at the Charles Schwab. He's been struggling around the greens. It's going to give me a little bit of pause there, but again, he does really like to step up his game at majors. And his Poa-Nua putting, a lot better than his normal putting by a decent amount there. So I don't mind him. I don't really mind using him all that much, especially with the switch of putting surfaces there. But probably not someone I'm going to be attacking all too much. And then Paul Casey, who used to be the most consistent golfer on the tour, now he is the most inconsistent. If you look at the consistency column under field rank splits, it shows you how consistent or inconsistent, pretty much their standard deviation from round to round when it comes to field rank. Well, he's the lowest of anyone that I've talked about so far, and the guy underneath him has the exact same number. That person is Phil Mickelson. So right now he's at Phil Mickelson levels of inconsistency, which is nutty because Phil Mickelson has a win and a runner-up finish this year, but also he's missed a bunch of cuts. And you could say the same about Casey. He most recently withdrew at the Charles Schwab citing an illness, missed the cut horribly at the Masters. He destroyed people at the Masters, destroyed people at the Players, and in between those two events, he won the Valspar. So this dude's crazy with it. 4th at the Wells Fargo. Just wildly up and down this year. Only 65% of his cuts made over the last year. That is not the Paul Casey I know. I don't know what happened there, but the last 2 years, he finally started playing the Pebble Beach Pro-Am. And, not really the last 2 years, the last 1 year, because I forget the last one was played in 2019. He finished runner-up, and then in 2018 finished 8th, that Pro-Am. So very good at Pebble Beach. Made the cut here way back in 2010. Finished T40. My hands are kind of up in the air with him. He's looking like Ryan Palmer, honestly. Definitely a GPP play, no longer a cash game play. And he used to be a cash game staple. That's just not the case anymore. Going to Phil Mickelson at $8,200. He has the most wins at Pebble with 5, including just recently this year, 2019. But he has missed 3 straight cuts. He's finished 116th at the Players, just horrible looking there. But in between all that, the one cut he's made in his last 5 events was a Masters where he finished T18. Very good for him. And, it's a place where he does play well. Obviously, he's won at the Masters. I usually just tell people that if he's playing well, just fade him, and if he's playing well, then playing him in Showdown. But if you're going to play him, this would be the week to play him, I guess. I think he's very course dependent, maybe more than almost any other golfer on tour. Very course dependent. He's, on record saying that he's trying to only play events where, the course is up, something that he likes. Whenever you talk around the green, scrambling, that's Phil Mickelson's calling card, always has been. Over the last 10 rounds, he's lost strokes in every other category, though. Even over the last 25 rounds. It's not been great for Phil, honestly. He's in terrible form. Horrible driving accuracy. Losing tons of birdies to the field and fantasy points to the field. Not much of a play to be made here, outside of the fact that he's so freaking good at Pebble Beach, and he's going for that elusive Grand Slam at the U.S. Open, where he's finished runner-up 1 billion times. So Phil Mickelson, just a GPP wild shot. I think he's still going to retain popularity with the public because it's known that he is very good at Pebble Beach. He's good at the West Coast, sort of like Rahm, California kid. It's just really hard with Phil to decide what to do. Again, wildly inconsistent, but hey, if you're going to play him in GPP, play him in Showdown, and just kind of move on from there. I'd say, if you mix a weekend, definitely play him in Showdown. As far as GPP goes, I will have shares because I'm crazy, but I don't think many people will, especially in optimizer tournaments, like the Mini Max, the 150 Maxes. I don't think Phil is going to be put in by any optimizer out there. That's not really going to happen, but I still think that he definitely has a reason to. If you're running multi-entry, you shouldn't full fade Phil by any means because there's some magic at this course, and he's definitely he's definitely holding a wand, that's for sure. But we'll have to see how he pops off with it, or if he does, because the form just is not looking good, and usually form trumps course history. You look at Bryson DeChambeau, another guy who is in DeChambles. Can't really say that. He tried to defend his title at the Memorial, ended up finishing T22. It was looking a lot worse than that, though, but I think he had a really strong Saturday. I don't know what to really tell you about DeChambeau, another guy that's just kind of he kind of evades analysis in a way. He ranks 8th in projected fantasy point scoring per round. That's a nice little positive there. It's just he has been on a bit of a cold streak, and I don't know if it's regressing one way or another, because if you look back about a year ago this time, he was, crushing it, and he would end up winning several events. I think he won 4 events last year. But before that, if you remember the year before that, he was garbage. He was so bad. And then you go back another year to when he was very, very young, and he is, looking very good initially. He's just kind of wildly up and down. So just kind of toss him into the pile here with Phil and Casey. The low 8K range is just the who knows range. You even got Louis Oosthuizen in this range, who's another guy who's crazy inconsistent, could withdraw at any time for any reason, and has withdrawn at the U.S. Open for whatever reason in 2013, but usually plays great at majors. Top 25 in the last 4 years at the U.S. Open, runner-up in 2015. He always likes to pop off at majors and finish second. Could happen, really, but who knows? He avoids Pebble Beach Pro-Ams. We don't really even know how he does at this course, besides in 2010 he missed the cut here. Just like Gary Woodland at $8,000. He missed the cut here in 2010. He does do better at less than driver courses, even though he's a bomber, so that's always been the case, too. It really has. 86% field rank in short courses. It's one of the best marks in the field. And this has been a thing for years. I don't know why. You get that driver out of Gary Woodland's hand, he just plays better. He just does. He usually racks up some ownership, but his results at the U.S. Open, honestly, have been less than stellar. honestly pretty bad. And outside of an 8th place finish at the PGA Championship, his results recently on tour have also been pretty bad. But I don't know. I think the price is relatively fair there. If anything, I would probably play him just for the fact that short course split intrigues me, but it's kind of been backed up by, history. It's just kind of what he does. It's weird. That, and he's been gaining a lot of strokes approach recently, honestly. It's just poor putting. It's almost always the case with him. Moving down further through this field, just gotta finally start skipping some guys. I can't talk about every single person. I'd be here forever, and we want to get this pod out eventually, but Patrick Reed could be sneaky. No one's going to really play him. His form is in the toilet, but very good at the U.S. Opens, 4th last year, and good at Pebble Beach in general. I know it's not really the strongest of cases for him, but also strokes gained around the green, that is his specialty. Big time, and that will be something that comes into play here. Also putts better on POA. Sergio Garcia. He's interesting because he's been awful at majors. Just garbage at majors. He's missed his last 8 or so cuts at majors, but before that he won the Masters, right? Avoids Pebble Beach, but interesting little fact with him, and I forgot to mention this with Justin Rose. Justin Rose, number 1 in all the PGA Tour with approach shots under 125 yards, which this course has the most of. And Sergio Garcia, 3rd on tour in that same stat. Very good wedge player, and that will come into play here. But over the last year, he's made 44% of his cuts. I'm just going to let that sink in. If you go back 2 years, it's even worse. A year and a half is garbage. But he has shown some signs of coming back this year. Looked good earlier in the year. 4th at the Wells Fargo. But yeah, he's missed the cut at last week at the Canadian, missed the cut at the PGA Championship and the Masters, because he sucks at majors now, I guess. I don't know, but $7,800, not the worst play to be made. Now, it's chalk time. Someone sound off the cowbell of the chalk, because this is the chalk right here. Sometimes you're not sure if a guy's going to be the chalk, but some weeks we just know, and this week it's definitely Webb Simpson. $7,700. Winner of the U.S. Open in 2012. Runner-up last weekend. This dude is just on a tear. 21 cuts made in his last 22 events on tour. Way underpriced here. Rates 8th in projected round score. Has made 87% of his cuts over the last year. 84% field rank split at majors. One of the best in the entire field. I know he's got a lot of his work done recently through putting, especially last week. Last week, his putter carried him. But that was also on POA Nua Green, so more power to you there, Webb. He's still gaining strokes in every single category. It's just most of the strokes gained recently have been through the putter. So if there's a reason to fade him, it's because he's the chalk, first off. My goal with him 100% is... I'll probably just play him, honestly. If I was a smarter person, if I had more balls than I actually do, I would play Webb Simpson in cash, draft.com, and fade him in tournaments, because he's going to be the chalk. Especially with, that putter production, but he sticks out like a sore thumb. You can see the make the cut percentages. He's at 76% implied, better than other guys around here. 33% chance to top 20. Just really solid numbers. Sticks out. Odds pricing 40-1. Everyone else in this range 60, 70, 80, 90, 150 to 1. Yeah, he's just mispriced. That is a mispricing. And he's not the first mispricing of this group, honestly. So I'm about to talk about one here soon that I am quite biased towards. But let's talk about Kevin Na here real quick. Coming off the win at the Charles Schwab. And he got it done with some seriously sick approach game. That's been really hot for him lately. Shorter course also works very well in his favor. Gaining some birdies and fantasy points, honestly. I kind of like him, even though he's well overpriced and not a very good odds to pricing value. 90-1 compared to Webb Simpson's 40-1. And he has done pretty well at Pebble as well. And after him, you've got a guy that looks like he's not going to be popular at all. He's 150-1. Same price as Webb Simpson is 40-1. And that's Rory Sabatini. But there's almost no one hotter than him. He has been electrifying over the last several months. Coming in, 10th, 18th, 5th, 6th, and 27th. Those are his last finishes on tour. Just amazing. But there's a catch with him. He sucks big time at the U.S. Open. And he's so bad at it. He's not the U.S. Open even. It's at Pebble Beach particularly. He's so bad. Since 2012, he's pretty much missed the cut every single year. And he goes to Pebble Beach Pro-Am every single year. Maybe he just doesn't take it as seriously. I don't know. But in 2010, when they played the U.S. Open here at Pebble Beach, he missed the cut. And it was pretty bad. Actually, Kevin Na, I did mention, I was just talking about him, but he finished 140th here. Like, he was 15 strokes over par in 2 days. But, chalk that up to just bad weather and Kevin Na being Kevin Na. Like, this is a guy who got a 16 on a par 4 once. Sabatini, it seems like he won't be popular at 150 to 1, but I bet he does get popular because that game log is smoking. If you are uninformed and you're just looking at game logs, you lock in Rory Sabatini instantly. You're like, wow, what a value. But he's not really a value. He's actually a fade for me. And I've been riding that train. I'm finally hopping off it. Just feels like the right time. And now we get to move on to my favorite play of the week. Well, second favorite play of the week. Fleetwood's number 1 here. Number 2, my favorite play just in general, every single week, Henrik Stenson. This guy, I know, I play 30% of him every single week. This week, I'm not sweating that one bit. He don't cost much at all, $7,600. What a value for him. And like I mentioned earlier, number 1 in strokes gained approach. Over the last 25 rounds, gains a stroke and a half per round. Over the last 50 rounds, 1.1 strokes per round. He just finished 8th last week at the Canadian Open. Has been making cuts consistently. Has made his last 7 cuts in a row after a little bit of a shaky start to the year. 88% of his cuts made over the last year. And like I said, his strokes gained approach that's just what he does. He is the less than driver king. Like, he usually doesn't use the driver in the first place. Hits it 284 off the tee. That's going to be perfectly fine here. He's one of the leaders every single year in driving accuracy and greens and regulations. Very accurate. Pretty much what you're looking for here. And you'd think that would lead to him playing this Pro-Am, but he avoids it completely because he's another one of my spirit golfers. Like, he's my favorite golfer of all time, obviously. Quite biased here. I'm gonna just rant and rave over him because, believe me, I tell you when not to play Stenson. I know when not to play Stenson, but this is when you play Stenson, honestly. It doesn't mean he won't go out there and just randomly miss the cut, because he does do that from time to time. Sometimes when, things are working out his way, but he's massively underpriced. Like, he's 57 to 1 to win right now. That's like 100 less than Rory Sabatini for more expensive. And, his ownership might be kept in check because I think a lot of people just go to Rory, here in this range. He'll still be popular. I think he's going to be in the teens, but he's such a nice value. 6th last year at the U.S. Open, 4th in 2014. Does have a pretty solid track record of generally making the cut. He did withdraw in 2016 and missed the cut in 2017, but for the most part, he usually finishes top 30. He has 6 top 30 finishes in his last 7 events played, if you don't count the one where he withdrew. And of course, that one, they didn't come top 30 and he missed the cut at, but still very good numbers from him. Just a solid play. Same price as Bubba Watson, but Bubba Watson is freaking terrible at the U.S. Open. I don't think he likes the USGA setups, honestly, and he just hasn't looked very good recently. You got Matt Wallace, who's higher in the world golf rankings than Jordan Spieth. Yeah, that's the world golf rankings for it. It's weird. It's a very hard 2-year rolling period, and the scoring's pretty set in stone, and it allows some international wins to be a bit overrated. And voila, you got Matt Wallace, who likes to win on the European Tour. He was 3rd in the PGA Championship, though. I'm not going to take that away from him. Very good stuff that we've seen from him most recently. But he hasn't been good at the U.S. Open the last 2 years he's qualified. And just hasn't played Pebble Beach. So another inexperience kind of fade right there. You've got Ian Poulter, who also is not very good at Pebble Beach usually. Did make the cut here in 2010. He has missed his last 2 cuts, though. I think he made the cut at the Charles Schwab, but just would have MDF'd if they would have had one. But before that, he was making solid cuts. Made 80% of his cuts over the last year. Very, very good POA putter, but recently he's been struggling a lot with his around the green stuff. You've got Shane Lowry, who I had already mentioned is going to be a fade because he's just getting it all done through the putter and short game and nothing else. He lost strokes tee to green last week, but still came second. Then you've got Brandt Snedeker, who is kind of the same way, but at least that's the way that he's always done things. Super good around the green constantly. Very good on POA and newer greens. He's been putting like crazy recently. We just saw him on POA coming 4th last week at the Canadian Open. He'd recently switched swing coaches, and you've seen an instant, jump with him. 4 top 20s since then. Looking very solid, including 3 straight top 20 finishes in a row for him. 16th at the PGA Championship. And as a winner here at Pebble Beach twice in 2013 and 2015. 4th in 2017. Usually does very, very good, even though he missed the cut earlier this year. The entire West Coast swing for Snedeker earlier this year was bad. He had a very bad West Coast swing, which is not like him at all. Usually he's very good there. I think he got kind of the help that he needed. And he's seems to be right back where he needs to be. He finished 8th here in 2010 because this is a place where he should do very well. And he's awesome at U.S. Opens. He has 6 top 20 finishes since that 2010. That 8th place finish there. Just very solid, very consistent. Love me some Brandt Snedeker, and he's way underpriced. You've got U.S. Open winner from 2014, Martin Keimer at $7,400 coming off a 3rd place finish at the Memorial. He's terrible otherwise, like statistically, and he got it all done through a short game, but it's just interesting. Moving down, you've got the winner from 2010, Graham McDowell, who finished top 20 at Pebble Beach earlier this year, 10th in 2017. Solid with his cut making. He's made 91% of his cuts on the season. Did just barely miss by 1 stroke at the Charles Schwab, but turned around top 10 last week at the Canadian Open. Looks to be a solid play, but I think he's going to be popular. You've got Rafa Cabrera Baio, same price. 22nd and 26th the last 2 years at Pebble Beach. In 2010, he actually made the cut, and he was one of the first round leaders, actually. Very good at fantasy point scoring per hole. One of the best, actually. 94% of his cuts made over the last year. He's a very interesting play for me. Getting it done around the green recently as well. And then you've got one of my favorite plays in the entire board, Jim Furyk. It is Jim Furyk week, I'm telling you. Very good at Pebble Beach usually. 16th here in 2010. Runner-up several times on the U.S. Open. I think he's come runner-up 3 times. And speaking of runner-up, he was runner-up at the Players earlier this year. He's made 3 straight cuts coming in. Was looking really good, honestly. Even at courses where he shouldn't have done very well at. The only concerns are the RBC Heritage, where he should have done a lot better, and that was super disappointing, missing the cut there, and at the PGA Championship. But he's not losing as many birdies to the field as he usually is. The struggle is fantasy point scoring with him. Like, he ranks 34th in projected round score, but 69th, nice, and projected fantasy points per round. But I think he's another guy that really needs certain types of courses. And, he's pretty decent at the short courses so far. 67% field rank, a lot better than the guys around him. But I think this course in particular should really suit him. 280 off the tee, not going to be a deal here at all. Just very accurate, super accurate. 75% driving accuracy, 73% greens regulation. And his strokes gained approach has been super solid all year long. I love me some Jim Furyk for just $7,200. Really nice stuff there. I've got Billy Horschel at the same price. His finishes recently over the last 4 weeks have been 23rd, 19th, and 9th. Some really good stuff from him, making a lot of cuts in general. That approach and off the tee game that we saw really soar for him at the end of last year, that's coming back. Over the last 10, he's gained a good amount of strokes off the tee, and especially approach. That's always a good thing. for Mr. Billy Horschel, and he hasn't been as reliant on the putter as he had been before. So I'm loving me some Horschel. Is a nice little value play there. And then moving along further down this list, a huge fade for me would be Alex Noren at $7,100. I know he's looked a little bit better recently, starting to make some cuts, but he sucks at the U.S. Open really bad. He's never played Pebble, and he is last on tour in wedge play. No, thank you. You've got a CT Pan at $7,100. I love CT Pan. He sucked here at Pebble Beach in 2017, but he is super good at short courses. He won the RBC Heritage, which is like, it's a short course. That's what it is. And third most recently at the Charles Schwab Invitational after an unfortunate miscut at the PGA Championship. But Bethpage didn't really line up for him much at all. He seems to be dependent on the course in a very similar way to Jim Furyk. Only 290 off the tee, which ain't bad. He used to be even worse. So like me some CT Pan, and at $7,000, you got a plethora of some good plays here. You've got Jimmy Walker, who has 5 top 10 finishes and a win at Pebble Beach since 2011, and also a top 10 finish back in 2014 at the U.S. Open, but it's been really bad for him since. Starting to look really solid on tour, actually, making a lot of cuts and a lot of top 30 finishes, including 3 in a row for him. So I like me some Jimmy Walker, actually. It seems like he's finally kind of turned things around a little bit. I know he still deals with Lyme disease oftentimes, and it can kind of strike, at random. It's just the nature of it. Seemed to have struck him earlier in the year when he missed the cut pretty badly here, but still, it's arguably one of his best courses outside of, the Sony Open. So gotta like Jimmy Walker here. There is a bit of a concern with his birdie making. It's not great, but I wouldn't really play him in cash, but he seems almost like a cash safe-ish sort of guy, but I would keep him in GPPs. You've got Zack Johnson, who is a theoretical really good fit for the course, hasn't played here in a while. Did miss the cut in 2010 by a stroke, but at the U.S. Open, he's been really solid over the last 3 years. Not been solid on tour over the last few months, honestly. He's been missing some cuts. Not back-to-back, because he never misses back-to-back cuts. I think he's only missed back-to-back cuts once in the last decade. But still has been struggling. Has not been put up the performances we're used to from Zack Johnson. Last year we saw a lot more top 20s from him than we have this year. It's not really been the thing. But speaking of top 20s, Lucas Glover at $7,000. He's the king of top 20s this year. He is constantly finishing in the top 20. And his last 2 finishes at the Pebble Beach Pro-Am, this year he finished 7th. And 2016 was the last time he played. He finished 11th. Good stuff from him. Very cheap price. The issue here is he is absolute hot garbage at the U.S. Open. So keep that in mind. He has no finish better than T68 since 2011, which is pretty much the last time he had done anything. And that was a T42 finish. He is so bad at the U.S. Open. So you can cite his PGA Championship and say he's a major winner, but he is a major loser here at the U.S. Open with the USGA setup. I think it has something to do with the fast greens. Remember that he used to be the worst putter on tour by a long shot, and during those years that he was the worst putter on the PGA Tour, he seriously struggled at the U.S. Open. So I would not really mess with Lucas Glover too much, even though he really looks like he rates out. I've heard people talking about using him, but I don't know. I'm a little bit sketched. I don't know. But at the same time, the U.S. Open courses that they've gone to over the last several years have been much different than what we expect from Pebble. And he did make the cut here in 2010, finishing T58 for what it's worth. So, I don't know, kind of a polarizing play. Definitely a GPP play. I would not play him in cash, believe me. He looks like a cash-safe play, but he is just not. And then you've got Thomas Pieters. We haven't seen him much on tour recently, but when we have, he's been making the cut. Seriously solid numbers in the very limited events that we have played for him. 6 for 6 in made cuts, and we have seen him pop off at majors. We've seen him in 4 majors over the last year with an 86% field rank. That is one of the best in the entire field. That's actually tied for the best in the entire field. If you remember, he popped off as the first round leader at the Masters last year. Really underrated play there. Although do know that he does a lot of his work off the tee, at least on the European Tour, but we actually haven't seen that as much here on the American Tour. Has yet to play on POA, actually, is another thing that might be a bit of a reason for concern. But finishing out the 7K range here is Keegan Bradley, who is just like an approach game specialist and a short game. He's really bad at the short game. Usually pretty bad at the U.S. Open too, but he did finish 4th in 2014. Avoids Pebble Beach, but finished 15th in 2011, the last time he did actually attempt to play the Pro-Am. He's not been as good on tour recently. He usually is a pretty safe, like, make the cut kind of guy. 80% of his cuts made over the last year, but over the last few months, no finish better than T29, and some missed cuts sprinkled in. I don't know, he's just okay for me. Now move along to, you've got Byung Hyung, who actually played here in 2010, believe it or not. That's the last time he played Pebble Beach, and he missed the cut pretty badly. His 17th of the Memorial last time out, which is a nice little bounce back because he had been really struggling with some injury stuff before that, but I don't really know. He would rate out otherwise. It's just he doesn't really have much experience with this course, and the experience he has was a bad experience. You got Ches Reavie at $6,900, finished runner-up at Pebble Beach in 2018, top 20, the U.S. Open in 2017, and I know he missed the cut by a stroke at the Charles Schwab, but before then he had been riding a nice little form of top 30s, and he does much better on the West Coast usually than on the East Coast, so he's someone to consider. 79% driving accuracy over the last few months. That is insane. I think that's the best in the entire field. I've got Justin Harding, who's had some pop-offs recently, like at the Masters. He was 12th, 10th at the Byron Nelson, but it was all putting, and he has yet to putt on POA. That is a concern, but he is a West Coast kid, so I don't think POA will actually be as much of a concern as it would be for someone else. Speaking of West Coast kids, $6,900, Charles Howell III. He actively avoids playing the Pro-Am for, reasons. Like, I think a lot of the smart players don't play this event because it's one of the worst events on tour, actually. One of the most fun events on tour, but honestly one of the worst events on tour. He's all about his bread. You know that. He stacks up the dollars in the West Coast. He just does that. Every single year he starts off by making like his first 12 cuts in a row. And it was the same this year. He's great on the West Coast swing, and actually extenuated that form into Florida. Over the last 5 or 6 weeks, he has been, last 5 or 6 events played, he has been horrible. I finally missed a cut and then finished T91, T99, withdrawal, T41 at the PGA Championship, the one major he played, which was nice. So he made the cut at the PGA Championship and the Masters, and then missed the cut fairly badly at the Memorial. And all of these places are pretty much courses where he didn't have course history at, not in the West Coast, on the East Coast. It's nice to see him go back to the West Coast, although he has not played this course in forever. But if you go back to when he had played the course, he's 5 for 5 and made cuts here. Hadn't played the U.S. Open in a long time until last year, finished T25. I like this play a lot, honestly. I think he bounces back, and I think he bounces back at very low ownership. I have him kind of circled here, honestly. You got Aaron Wise, who I faded last week and ended up being a fool's errand. I mean, I really liked him. It was just that I saw that everyone was going to be on him, and they were. He's like 19% owned, but it backfired. He was up there at the top of the leaderboard for a long time, ended up falling back to 20th, but this is a guy I had circled. He was 8th at the PGA Championship. Very, very good ball striker on the PGA, or on the European Tour. He does struggle a bit with his around the green stuff, but so far from what we've seen, he's a good POA putter. Eric Van Rooyen, $6,900, has inexperience with Pebble. I don't think he's played the course ever, but he ranks 14th in projected round score. That's pretty neat, actually. The sample size, though, is limited. Only 5 events played on the PGA Tour, so keep that in mind. You got Danny Willett, who's been playing a lot better. Top 10 last week at the Canadian Open. He's interesting after just being hot garbage for quite a while, like several years. And then you're getting down to the garbage bin here in the 6K range, but there are a lot of interesting plays out there. You got Scottie Schaeffler, who's been tearing up the Web.com tour, won a few weeks ago, and in 3 PGA Tour events played so far in the season, he had top 40 finishes in each of them, making the cut pretty comfortably, gaining 29 fantasy points to the field in those events. So like me some Scottie Schaeffler for sure. There's another play somewhat similar. You got Victor Hovland, $6,700. Haven't seen him on tour much. He was the low amateur at the Masters, though, finishing T32. And last year he won the U.S. Amateur Open at Pebble Beach. So that's a really sneaky play there at $6,700. And you see he's got one of the best odds to pricing of anyone down here. This is where you're going to find the guys who are 300, 400, 500 to 1. I like to cut them off at about 250 to 1, 300 to 1. It kind of depends. He's going to be one of the lowest plays, that I'm going to play. Like Hovland is 275 to 1 right now, and I would play him for $6,700. And yeah, there aren't going to be too many plays to be made here, but I think that there are some of these guys that you can play, even up to like 400 to 1, just given the circumstances. Like $6,500, you've got Ernie Els, who's 500 to 1, 3 top 10s over the last decade in U.S. Opens, including a third here at Pebble Beach in 2010. There's not many places where I would play Ernie Els, and he had shown a bit of a resurgence earlier in the season, making a lot of cuts, but recently that's fallen off. Withdrew at the Memorial. Not a play I'm going to be making, huge on anytime soon, but recently it's just been his off the tee stuff that's been miserable, but gaining a lot of strokes around the green could come into play here. Really just kind of throwing stuff out there at this point. You've got Dean Burmester at $6,500. He's always one of my favorite European Tour guys, and he actually crushed his qualifier. He made the cut at the U.S. Open last year. It's just a little bit interesting. I wish it was a bomber's course, though, because he is quite the bomber usually. You got Nick Taylor, who looked solid at the Canadian Open last year. Has made a lot of cuts this year. He's like 360 to 1. But if you look at Pebble Beach, his results, 28th this year. Missed the cut in 2018, but before that, T10 in 2017, T30 in 2015. He's yet to play the U.S. Open. He really doesn't make... He doesn't make majors very often, but he did qualify. And a lot of these guys we're getting to are just going to be guys that got in through qualifiers. You've got Sepp Straka, who had been kind of really interesting. Was looking really good last week, but he fell off really hard. He kind of ruined my best lineup that was seriously contending in the birdie last week, but whatever. Still really nice. At $6,300, it really is the garbage bin. He's 600 to 1, so I don't know if I'd actually play him, but I think some people might. He ranks 30th in projected fantasy points per round, and that's a 15 event, 26 round sample size. It's not the lowest sample size I've ever seen. I'd mentioned earlier Chun and Yu, but I'm really only playing him because he's Taiwanese. So there's not actually that much of a take to be made here. Another guy I'm biased towards actually is Cameron Young. From Wake Forest, my favorite university there. Was looking like a really nice young graduate. Had a solid season. He had the third lowest average score in a season in his junior year at Wake Forest of all time. And Wake Forest is one of the best golf programs that there is. Arnold Palmer went there. Webb Simpson, Curtis Strange, Lanny. You've got so many good golfers. All the Hosses, Bill Haas, Jay Haas, etc. Just a really, really solid school for golf. And yeah, he's he could be one of, I don't know about low amateur, but it might be someone to consider there. And at the very, very bottom, you're not going to play any of these guys. They're all 700 to 1 or worse. But if you need to, I guess Carlos Ortiz at $6,100. But he's missed 3 straight cuts coming in, missed his only U.S. Open cut. I don't know if I'd actually play that. An interesting one. He's probably too old, honestly, but he made his one cut on the year this year. It was at the... Oh, never mind. It was at the WGC Mexico. He finished last. Never mind. I was going to mention Richard H. Lee, only because in 2012, 2013, and 2014, he finished top 15 at the Pebble Beach Pro-Am. But I'm sure he's last time we saw at the U.S. Open, he finished 143rd in 2015. So yeah, scratch that. We're pretty much out of plays that we can actually make here. I think the lowest I would honestly go, it's probably gonna have to be $6,500 there. Maybe I might use Els. Maybe I might use Burmester or Taylor, but I'm not really gonna go much lower than that. There's too much value in like this, the higher 6 and 7K range to really need to go all too much lower unless you're gonna jam in like 2 amazing studs. So that'll do it for the U.S. Open Taco Tuesday PGA DFS podcast. Good luck in all of your tournaments. There are so many nice, huge tournaments. Get out there, get in them, and bring home that money. Get those helmets up on the leaderboard like they always are. And I will see you guys next week. Peace out.